first time I met him is difficult to remember, but he was then an artist. He was doing excellent drawings for the ISIS, the popular undergraduate magazine, and I think I must have met him through that. He wanted to do a drawing of me, which he did, actually. It's in the old copy of the ISIS, there is a drawing of myself with a megaphone, because I used to recite like Edith Sitwell through a megaphone, recite her poems as well as The Waste Land. And he accompanied me to a League of Nations tea party.
The laughing cheat is sweet as foam, notices that she will steal the winking sluggish like Babel before the League of Nations grew.
In the pages of the ISIS, Waugh's sharp caricatures parodied the fads and fashions of Oxford undergraduate life.
Carrying the load and goading the road through the marine scene to the sea.
Evelyn was always one of the noisiest. He was a very noisy person at Oxford. After a few drinks, he used to rush around the streets, shouting little slogans, insults, and then teacher chased him out of doors. Shoo, shoo, go away, black cat. That was one of his things. That I don't know why he used to sing that, but and so forth. He used to insult people whom he disliked. It became quite difficult. A shriller note could now be heard rising from Sir Alister's rooms. Any who have heard that sound will shrink at the recollection of it. It is the sound of the English county families baying for broken glass. Soon they would all be tumbling out into the quad, crimsoned and roaring in their bottle green evening coats, for the real romp of the evening. "Don't you think it might be wiser if we turned out the light?" said Mr. Sniggs. In darkness the two dons crept to the window. The quad below was a kaleidoscope of dimly discernible faces. "There must be 50 of them at least," said Mr. Postlethwaite. "If only they were all members of the college. 50 of them at £10 each. Oh my! It'll be more if they attack the chapel," said Mr. Sniggs. "Oh, please God, make them attack the chapel. I wonder who the unpopular undergraduates are this term. They always attack their rooms. I hope they have been wise enough to go out for the evening. I think Partridge will be one. He possesses a painting by Matisse or some such name. And I'm told he has black sheets on his bed. And Saunders went to dinner with Ramsay MacDonald once. And Rending can afford to hunt, but collects china instead, and smokes cigars in the garden after breakfast. Austin has a grand piano. They'll enjoy smashing that. There'll be a heavy bill for tonight, just you see. But I confess I should feel easier if the dean or the master were in. They can't see us from here, can they?" It was a lovely evening. They broke up Mr. Austin's grand piano and stamped Lord Rending's cigars into his carpet and smashed his china, tore up Mr. Partridge's sheets and threw the Matisse into his water jug. Mr. Saunders had nothing to break except his windows, but they found the manuscript at which he had been working for the Newdigate prize poem. Arnold House, Llandullas, Denbighshire, North Wales. Dear Harold, I've meant to write to you 100 times during the last 3 weeks, but at all hours of the day I've been busied with teaching and beating and supervising, footballings, until when at last, after dinner, when all the animals were caged up, and I at last had some peace, I've been too sad and too weary to write anything. You've probably heard that I found it impossible to afford living in London any longer and have come here as a master. It is not really, I suppose, a bad school as schools go, but it is a sorry waste of time and energy. I do not think that I am good at teaching. At any rate, I have not succeeded so far in getting any idea into anyone's head. I want to write a book about Silenus, but shall never have time. Love, Evelyn.
He was very depressed as a schoolmaster, wasn't he?
Oh, I think anybody would be depressed as a schoolmaster. I can't conceive that schoolmastering can give any pleasure. He was very pre-Raphaelite in taste, and his first book was about Rossetti. Very well chosen, and I think an excellent book. But he was deeply offended because it was reviewed as if it was written by a woman, Miss Evelyn Waugh, or Mrs. even. And he wrote a letter of protest to the Times Literary Supplement, Evelyn Arthur St. John Waugh. And the reviewer, of course, was done this on purpose, spite. Yeah, she was a very rather boyish little girl who looked as if she was the same age, like his sister, might have been twins, deeply in love with each other and caressing each other and living very simply on a few pounds a week. Canonbury Square, the flat there was, I think, a pound a month or something. Incredibly little they paid for it. And it was an agreeable 18th century surroundings, and they brightened it up, became rather like a nursery, really. My dear Harold, no, Evelyn's defection was preceded by no sort of quarrel or estrangement. Certainly the fact that she should have chosen a ramshackle oaf like Haggett adds a little to my distress, but my reasons for divorce are simply that I cannot live with anyone who is avowedly in love with someone else. Everyone is talking so much nonsense on all sides of me about my affairs that my wits reel. Evelyn's family and mine join in asking me to forgive her, whatever that may mean. I'm escaping to Ireland for a week's motor racing in the hope of finding an honourable grave. I have absolutely no plans for the future. Evelyn is to live on at Canonbury. Naturally, I've done no work at all for 2 months. I did not know it was possible to be so miserable and live, but I'm told that this is a common experience. Love, Evelyn. And his conversion came at a moment when he was suicidally minded. There's no doubt his depression was very deep, and you could feel it, particularly under the influence of wine, and showed in Vino Veritas, and he was certainly very depressed. Father Darcy, yes, Father Darcy was a genius at converting people. And he was extremely eloquent, extremely hard, logical mind, and appealed to Evelyn. He couldn't have had a better priest to convert him, and he was just ripe for conversion. Abroad didn't please him at all originally. He was very local, that's what I mean to say, but after this divorce or separation, he traveled all over, but it was a palliative.
Would you have thought he would make a good traveller?
No, very difficult. He was far too English. So the old-fashioned Englishman who could not adapt himself to foreign habits and foreign foods. And when he was here, he always was the caricature of an Englishman, you know. Not speaking the language, complaining, and the waiters too fussy, and even going so far as to kick them. He really was very much the old-fashioned Englishman you find from Lawrence Sterne or Smollett, very like Smollett, who was also a difficult traveller. I think he liked discipline. You see, the Catholic Church is a discipline, and the army is a discipline, and that's what he was seeking. He was undisciplined, chaotic in himself, and he was seeking some sort of discipline. He found it in the army, and he enjoyed also the companionship of 100% sort of he-men, instead of the sort of types that he had been, like myself, who are not 100% he-men, whom he had been consorting with, you see, associating with. I think it was that. I think he enjoyed, he rather had a hero worship. He noticed everything and wrote beautifully about what he saw. I remember he had rather macabre taste. For instance, he liked waxworks. We have some very early 16th century, 17th century waxworks here in Florence, formerly in the Bargello, but now in another museum, which portray the plague of Florence. Evelyn was fascinated by them, spent hours looking at them and wanted photographs which are difficult to find because they're not exactly popular. Scenes of death and decay, corruption, rats with people's intestines. And Evelyn was fascinated by these, and they are very realistic.